She stole the money off our dead mother's grave. That's what my sister told the family. My sister Bridget stood in our parents' living room and swore I had pocketed the donations from our mother's memorial fund, money meant for the cancer ward that treated her. Thousands of dollars given by neighbors, by co-workers, by people who loved her. And Bridget said I'd taken it. My parents believed her in under a minute. They stopped answering my calls. My father changed the locks on the family office without telling me. My mother told her church group I was a thief. I had managed that fund. I had set it up. And now I was the one being cut out of it. I didn't argue. I didn't cry in front of them. I didn't beg anyone to believe me. 6 weeks later, they called a family meeting to vote me out for good. They thought that was the day they finished me. It was the day I set one folder on the table. I'm Coralie, 34, and the strange thing is that I was the only person in that family who couldn't have touched a cent of that money. And I was about to be the only one who could prove who did. Let me take you back to the morning it started. It started with a phone call I almost didn't pick up. It was a Tuesday in early spring, and I was at my desk reviewing a grant reconciliation when my father's name lit up my phone. I almost let it ring out. I think some part of me already knew that whatever was on the other end would change the shape of my family for good. I picked up anyway, because that's what I do. The reliable one always picks up. He never called during work hours. He called on Sundays briefly, mostly to ask if I'd seen the weather back home. So I stepped into the hallway and answered. Coralie. His voice was flat. We need to talk about the memorial money. I felt nothing wrong yet. Sure. Is there a problem with a donation? Don't play dumb with me. That was the first crack. My father did not talk to me like that. I am the quiet one, the one he used to call his steady girl, the one who balanced his checkbook the summer I turned 16. I waited. Bridget showed us the numbers, he said. We know what you did. I should explain who I am, because it matters to what came next. I'm a forensic accountant. I spend my days untangling where money actually went versus where people say it went. I work for a regional firm that gets hired by nonprofits, estates, and the occasional small business that suspects an employee is skimming. I am very good at one specific thing, following a dollar from the hand that gave it to the account that received it. So when my father accused me of theft, the irony was almost funny. Almost. What numbers? I asked. You set up the fund, you handled it. And now there's money missing. There's no money missing, I said. Every dollar went where it was supposed to go. I can send you the statements right now. We've seen enough. Here is what you need to understand about my mother's memorial fund. When she died, 18 months before that phone call, the family was drowning. My father couldn't open her closet without stopping in the hallway to breathe. Bridget cried so hard at the service that 2 cousins had to walk her out. And I did what I do. I made it functional. A neighbor suggested a memorial fund for the oncology unit that had cared for our mother through her last year. Everyone loved the idea. Everyone also assumed someone else would handle it. So I handled it. I want to be precise about this because the precision is the whole story. I did not open a personal account and ask people to send me money. I would never. I'm the person hired to catch people who do that. Instead, I worked directly with the hospital's charitable foundation. I set up a named giving fund through them, the Diane Whitman Memorial Fund, so that every donation went straight to the foundation's account. Not mine, not the family's, the foundation's. Donors gave directly, by check made out to the foundation, by the foundation's online portal, by a couple of larger gifts wired in. The money never passed through my hands. It couldn't. I designed it that way on purpose because I have watched grieving families tear themselves apart over exactly this kind of thing, and I swore mine never would. My only role was administrative. I tracked the totals. I sent thank you notes. I matched names to gifts so we could acknowledge people properly. That was it. So when my father said money was missing, I knew something was very wrong, but not on my end. Dad, I said carefully, I never held the money. It went to the hospital foundation directly. I literally cannot have taken it. Let me show you. Bridget already showed us where it went, he said. It went to you. And then he hung up. I stood in that hallway for a long moment, phone warm against my ear, the hum of the office around me. I didn't feel rage. I felt the specific cold that comes over me when numbers stop adding up, because somewhere someone had told my father a story with numbers in it, and those numbers came from somewhere. Before I go any further, if this story is already getting under your skin, take a second to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps these stories reach other people who've been the one nobody believed. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from right now. I read every single one. Now let me tell you what my sister had actually done. To understand my family, you have to understand the math of attention in it. There were 2 daughters. Bridget came first, 3 years ahead of me, and she came in loud. She was the one who lit up rooms, who got grounded and forgiven in the same afternoon, who could cry on cue and laugh you out of staying angry. My parents adored her the way you adore weather, helplessly, as a force you don't control. I came second, and quiet. I was the one who did the dishes nobody asked me to do. I got the good grades that earned a nod, not a party. When I won a state accounting competition in high school, my mother said, "That's nice, honey," and then spent the drive home talking about Bridget's new boyfriend. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand the role I was assigned. I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the one you could trust to handle the boring, important things while everyone else handled the feelings. What nobody in my family ever understood is that being the trusted one and being the loved one are not the same thing. You can be the person they hand the keys to and still not be the person they call when they're happy. I was the family's accountant long before I was anyone's actual accountant. So when our mother got sick, the assignment came to me automatically. Coralie will handle the insurance. Coralie will sort the bills. Coralie will know what the doctor meant. I did all of it. I sat in those plastic chairs and translated medical jargon for my father at 2 in the morning. I never once asked for thanks. Bridget came to the hospital too. She came with flowers and Instagram captions about treasuring every moment. She came when there were people to see her come. She left before the hard hours, the ones with the bedpans and the paperwork and the night nurse explaining what hospice meant. Our mother died on a gray February morning with my father holding one hand and me holding the other. Bridget was at home. She'd said she couldn't bear to watch. I don't say that to be cruel. Grief takes people different ways. But I noticed, the way I notice everything, that even in the worst moment of our lives, the labor fell to me, and the credit floated toward her. And here's the thing I didn't see coming, the thing that turned a family imbalance into a knife. Bridget had money problems, real ones, the kind that don't show up on Instagram. I'd find that out later. At the time, all I knew was that my sister had a new car, a renovated kitchen, and a husband, Trent, whose contracting business had been between projects for going on 2 years. I knew they took a cruise the same winter our mother was dying. I knew Bridget always seemed to have cash for the things that photographed well and never for the things that didn't. What I didn't know was how she was paying for any of it. That's the question that would eventually answer everything. But on that Tuesday, standing in the office hallway after my father hung up on me, I didn't have it yet. I just knew the fund was clean, and someone had told my family it wasn't. So I did the only thing I know how to do. I pulled the records. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and laid it all out. I logged into the foundation's donor portal. I still had viewer access, since I'd built the acknowledgement list. I pulled the complete giving history for the Diane Whitman Memorial Fund. Every gift. Every date, every donor name, and the running total sitting in the foundation's restricted account, untouched, exactly where it belonged. I printed it. I checked it against my own thank you log. They matched to the dollar. Then I called the foundation's gift officer, a patient woman named Dolores who had helped me set the fund up. I asked her plainly whether anyone had withdrawn anything. Well, withdrawn? She sounded confused. Honey, it's a restricted memorial fund. The money's earmarked for the oncology unit. It doesn't get withdrawn. It gets dispersed to the hospital on schedule with a board sign-off. Nobody can just take it out. Certainly not a family member. Could a family member have accessed it at all? No. The only people on that account are foundation staff. You were never even a signer. You set it up so you wouldn't be... I remember you were very firm about it. I closed my eyes. I remember too. So the money was safe. The accusation was impossible, which meant Bridget hadn't found missing money. She had invented it. and I needed to know why a person invents a theft. I learned the shape of her lie 3 days later from the worst possible person to learn it from. My Aunt Carol called me, my mother's older sister, a woman who has never once in her life kept an opinion to herself. I assumed she was calling to check on me. She was not. "Coralie," she said, "I just want you to know I'm praying for you, and I think it's never too late to make something right." "Make what right, Aunt Carol?" "The money, dear." Her voice dropped into that wet, sorrowful register people use when they think they're being kind. "Bridget showed us all the bank statement. Your name, right there, withdrawals all year. $11,000 gone from your sister's mother's memorial." The number landed like a stone. 11,000. So specific. Lies are usually vague. This one had a figure attached, which meant Bridget had a document, which meant Bridget had built something. "Aunt Carol," I said, "I never had access to that account. It's at the hospital foundation. Whatever statement she showed you, it isn't from the memorial fund." A pause. "It had the hospital's name on it, Coralie. It had your name on it. I saw it with my own eyes." And there it was, the whole architecture of it in one sentence. My name, the hospital's name. A document I'd never seen. I want to be honest about the moment after I hung up with my aunt. I sat very still. My hands were flat on the table, and what I felt was not the explosion you might expect. It was a door closing, because I understood all at once that my family had not been tricked into doubting me. They had wanted to. It took my father under a minute on the phone. It took my aunt one look at a piece of paper. 34 years of being the responsible one, the trustworthy one, and the moment someone handed them a reason to believe I was a thief, they grabbed it with both hands. That was the wound, not the lie, the speed. I'd spent my whole life being the one you could count on, and it turned out that meant nothing, because being counted on isn't the same as being believed. The second it cost them nothing to suspect me, they did. I didn't cry. I made tea. And then I opened a new file on my laptop and typed a single line at the top. Where did the document come from? Because I might be the family disappointment now, but I am, professionally and personally, the person who finds out where the money went. And my sister had just handed me a paper trail and dared me to follow it. The lie didn't stay in the family. That was the next thing I learned, and it was worse than the phone calls. Aunt Carol belonged to a church, the same one my mother had attended, the same one that had given generously to the memorial fund. And Aunt Carol, armed with Bridget's forged statement and a fresh sense of moral duty, told everyone. I found out from a woman named Sheila who'd worked with my mother for 20 years and had donated $300 to the fund. She emailed me, careful and hurt, asking if it was true that the money she'd given for Diane's memory had been taken by the family. She'd heard it at a fellowship dinner. She wanted to know whether she should warn the others who'd given. That email did something the phone calls hadn't. It made me realize the lie was metastasizing. Every day it spread, it took on the weight of more mouths. People who'd loved my mother now believed her own daughter had robbed her grave, and they believed it of me. By the time I could prove the truth, half the town would have already filed me under thief, and the truth would arrive too late to catch up. I wrote Sheila back. I kept it simple. I told her the official fund was intact, that I could show her the foundation's records, and that I was looking into where the reception donations had gone. I didn't accuse anyone. I just planted a flag. The money you gave through the foundation is safe, and I can prove it. She wrote back within the hour. I never believed it of you, Coralie. You were the only one who showed up when your mother was sick. I told them that. They didn't want to hear it. I read that line 3 times. Someone had defended me. Someone who wasn't even family had stood up at a church dinner and said the quiet one was the one who showed up. It steadied something in me, because it meant the truth still had a foothold out there if I could reach it fast enough. But it also raised the stakes. This was no longer a private family misunderstanding I could fix with a folder of statements. It was a public verdict, hardening by the day. And a public lie can only be answered one way, in public, with everyone who heard the lie in the room to hear the truth land. The locks were the next message. My father owned a small commercial property, a 2-room office downtown where he'd run his insurance practice before he retired. It had become a kind of family hub. The mail came there. The household files lived there. I'd kept my own copies of the memorial paperwork in a cabinet in the back room, because home was small and the office was secure. I drove over that Saturday to retrieve those files, planning to compare my originals against whatever Bridget was passing around. My key didn't work. I tried it twice, the way you do, as if the lock might reconsider. Then I noticed the bright new brass of the deadbolt, the little curls of fresh shavings still caught in the door frame. He'd had it rekeyed. He hadn't told me. He'd let me drive across town to discover with my own hands that I was locked out. I stood on that sidewalk in the cold and I thought about the summer I was 16 when he taught me to do the office books, his hand over mine on the calculator. His steady girl. And now the steady girl was a stranger he'd bolted the door against. A voice behind me said, "You shouldn't be here." It was Bridget. She'd been waiting, I realized, or watching. She had a coffee in her hand and a look on her face I'll never forget. Not anger, not guilt. Satisfaction. "You changed the locks," I said. "Dad did, after what you did." She took a slow sip. "You really thought you'd get away with it? Taking from Mom's fund? You always thought you were smarter than everyone." "There's nothing missing, Bridget. I never had the money." "That's not what the statement says." "What statement? Show me." She smiled. "I'm not showing you anything." I showed the people who matter. She turned to go, then looked back. "You should just admit it and pay it back. It would be easier for everyone. The family's already decided." "The family's already decided." She walked to her car. The new one. The one I now understood I'd half paid for without knowing it. And as her taillights pulled away, I felt the last warm thing in me go quiet and cold. She didn't want me to pay back money I'd never taken. She wanted me to confess to a crime she'd committed, so that the trail would dead end at me forever. She'd made one mistake, though. She thought she was talking to her quiet little sister. She was actually talking to the auditor who was about to take her apart. The accusation followed me home, and then it followed me to work, which is where it got dangerous in a way Bridget probably never intended. My job depends on one thing: trust with money. I am hired precisely because clients believe I am incapable of touching what isn't mine. So when a voicemail landed on my work line, a man's voice, careful, identifying himself as being from your sister's side of the family, saying he thought my employer ought to know what kind of person is handling their books, I felt the floor tilt. It was Trent. I knew the voice. He'd called my office, found the general line, and left a message designed to make my firm wonder whether their forensic accountant was herself a thief. I sat with that for a long time, because this was the escalation, and it was a different kind of cruelty than the locks or the lie. The lie had cost me my family. This could cost me my career, the one thing I'd built entirely on my own, the one place where being the careful, reliable, untrusted daughter had finally translated into being the trusted professional. They were reaching for the only thing I had left. I did the only correct thing. I went to my managing partner myself, before the message could fester, and I told her everything: the fund, the forgery, the accusation, the call. I laid the foundation's records on her desk unasked. I'd rather be the person who over-disclosed than the person who got found out. She listened to all of it. Then she slid the records back across the desk and said, "Coralie, you're the most careful person in this office. You structured a fund so you couldn't touch it. That's the opposite of a thief. Handle your family. Your job's fine." She paused. "And if that man calls again, forward it to me. We document harassment too." I walked out of her office shaking, but not from fear, from the strange, foreign feeling of being believed by someone, instantly, completely, at the exact moment my own father wouldn't. A stranger I worked for trusted me more than the man who taught me to count. That gap was the whole wound, sitting right there in the daylight where I couldn't pretend not to see it. It also lit something in me that had been smoldering. Trent had just shown me they'd burn down anything of mine to protect Bridget, which meant there was no version of this where I kept my head down and waited for it to pass. They weren't going to let it pass, so I stopped thinking about defending myself and started thinking about proof. I started with the document because the document was the lie made physical, and physical things can be traced. I couldn't get Bridget to show it to me. But she'd shown it to half the family, and family members are terrible at keeping anything off their phones. My cousin Renata, Aunt Carol's daughter, the only person on that side who still texted me like a human being, had been at the dinner where Bridget passed it around. I called her. I didn't accuse anyone. I just said, "Ren, I need to see what Bridget showed everyone. Not to fight, to understand." Renata was quiet for a second. Then she said, "I took a picture of it. I don't know why. Something about it felt off to me. The way she had it all printed out and ready, like she'd been waiting." She sent it over. And the moment I opened that image, my whole body went still in the way it does when a fraud finally shows me its face. It was a bank statement. It had the hospital's name on the letterhead, but not the foundation's name. It said Memorial Care Fund, not Diane Whitman Memorial Fund. Close enough to fool a grieving father, not close enough to fool me. And down the right column, a series of withdrawals across the year, each one labeled in a way that any casual reader would tie to me. The account holder line, blurry but legible if you knew to look, read C. Whitman. C. Whitman. My name is Coralie Whitman, but there is another C. Whitman in this family. My sister married Trent Davenport, kept Whitman professionally, and on a certain kind of paperwork she controlled. She is also C. Whitman. I sat back in my chair, because what I was looking at was not the memorial fund at all. It was a real account, with real withdrawals, dressed up to look like the memorial fund and pinned on me. And if that account existed, then somewhere out there was the truth of where actual money had actually gone. I just had to find which account it really was, and I had a guess that turned my stomach. If your own family handed a stranger your name and called you a thief, would you stay silent or would you start digging? Tell me honestly in the comments. Now let me show you what I found. The account number on Bridget's fake statement was partly blurred, but fraud has a grammar and I read it fluently. She'd built her lie out of a real document. That much was obvious because the formatting, the spacing, the bank's specific quirks were all genuine. You can fake a number on a real statement far more easily than you can fake an entire statement from scratch. So the bones of that paper were real, which meant Bridget had a real account at that bank, with real activity that she had photographed, altered to swap in the hospital's name, and recaptioned to look like memorial withdrawals. The withdrawals were real. She just lied about whose they were and what fund they came from. So the question became almost simple. Was there ever a second unofficial memorial collection, one that did pass through somebody's personal hands? There was, and I'd forgotten about it because I'd had nothing to do with it. At the funeral, Bridget had stood up and announced tearfully that for anyone who didn't trust online stuff, she would personally collect cash and checks at the reception and make sure every penny gets to Mom's fund. People had pressed envelopes into her hand. Older relatives, mostly. Neighbors who didn't use computers. I remembered being mildly annoyed at the time because it created a second stream of money outside the clean system I'd built. But I'd let it go. She was grieving. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing. That cash never reached the foundation. I knew that for a fact because I had the foundation's complete records, and every single donation in them was traceable to a named donor through the official channels. There was no line for cash collected at reception. Whatever went into Bridget's hands at that funeral had never come out the other side. I needed to know how much, so I did something quiet and patient and entirely legal. I started calling the donors. I had the thank you list, the official one, of people who'd given through the foundation. But the reception cash had come from a different crowd. So I called the relatives and neighbors I knew had attended, the older ones, and I framed it gently. I'm updating our records to thank everyone properly. Did you happen to give at the reception or online? One after another, the picture came together. Mr. Pruitt from down the road. A check for $200 handed to Bridget. The Garveys, $300 in cash. A cousin of my mother's, $500 in an envelope. Right into Bridget's hand. Such a sweet girl. Some of those calls undid me a little. Not because of the money, because of what people remembered. Mrs. Garvey, who was 76 and had been my mother's bridge partner for 30 years, told me she'd given $300 in cash because Diane was the kind of friend you don't replace. Then she said, "Your sister hugged me and told me she'd take care of it." Such a comfort to know family was handling it. I had to sit down for that one, because the comfort that old woman felt was a lie, and I was the one who'd have to take it from her. Lorraine, my mother's cousin, kept the conversation going for 40 minutes, mostly stories about the two of them as girls. At the end, she said almost shyly, "I gave 500. I know it's a lot. But Diane lent me money once when I had nothing and never said a word about it to anyone. I wanted to pay it forward in her name." $500 given to honor a kindness handed to Bridget, gone. I wrote each name down, each amount, each date. I am by trade a person who turns grief and chaos into rows in a spreadsheet, and I have never once resented the work the way I resented it that week. Not because it was hard, but because every row was a person who had loved my mother and been quietly robbed of the chance to honor her. Such a comfort to know family was handling it. That line followed me around for days. It was the lie in miniature. The whole con in one sentence, the way Bridget had wrapped theft in the costume of a grieving, dependable daughter. The exact role I'd actually played, worn by the person who'd stolen from it. I built a spreadsheet of every reception gift I could confirm. By the end of 2 weeks, I had documented over $6,000 in cash and checks that had been given in front of witnesses to my sister, and that had never, not $1 of it, appeared in the memorial fund. $6,000 that vanished into Bridget, and $11,000 she'd accused me of taking. The numbers didn't even match. Her lie was bigger than her theft, which is the mistake greedy people always make. They can't resist rounding up. I had the donors. I had the foundation's clean records. I was building the truth one phone call at a time. And then I found the thing that turned a sad story into a provable crime. One of those checks had been deposited. Here is the difference between cash and a check, and it is the difference that ended everything. Cash disappears. You hand someone $200 in bills and there's no trail, only the memory of the people who watched. But a check is a record that writes itself. It has a front and a back. It has a deposit endorsement, and banks keep images of both for years. Mr. Pruitt, the neighbor, had given a check. $200, made out, he told me on the phone, and I could have kissed him through it, to Diane Whitman Memorial. Not to the foundation. To the memorial generally, because he was 81 and trusted that the family would route it correctly. That check had to have been deposited somewhere, and wherever it landed, the endorsement on the back would name the account. I asked Mr. Pruitt very gently if he still had his bank records from that month, or if he could request the cleared check image from his bank. He was delighted to help. Older folks who bank in person can get a teller to pull a cleared check image faster than any app. 3 days later, he called me back, pleased as anything, and read me what was stamped on the back of his returned check. For deposit only, he read slowly. Davenport Renovations, LLC. Davenport. Trent's company. Bridget's husband's contracting business, the one that had been between projects for 2 years. A check written for my dead mother's memorial had been deposited into my sister's husband's business account. I sat very still. I'd found it. Not the whole of it, but the keystone. A donation meant for a cancer ward had paid down a contractor's overdraft. And to cover it, Bridget had needed someone to blame for the larger pile of money she'd been quietly skimming. So she'd built a forged statement, slapped my name on it, and offered me up to a family that was all too willing to believe the quiet daughter had finally shown her true colors. I had Mr. Pruitt's check. I had the foundation's pristine records proving the official fund was whole and untouched. I had a growing list of reception donors whose gifts had evaporated. And I had Renata's photo of the forgery itself. What I did not have yet was a witness from inside the bank. Someone who could stand up and say, in plain words, this account was never the memorial fund, and this woman was never on it. Because in my experience, families believe documents, but they break open when a person looks them in the eye and tells the truth. So I kept pulling threads, and the next one I pulled nearly came loose in my hand. The reception checks were one trail, but I kept thinking about the $11,000 on Bridget's forged statement. That number had to come from a real account too, because Bridget never invented a figure she couldn't point at. The fake statement showed real withdrawals. The question was what account those withdrawals had actually drained. I couldn't see her bank records. I had no right to and no way. But I didn't need her records. I needed the world's record of her spending, which people leave everywhere without realizing it. I started building a timeline of Bridget's life over the past year. The visible parts, the new car, the kitchen renovation, the cruise. And I cross-referenced it against the dates of the withdrawals printed on her own forged statement, the dates she'd been careless enough to leave unaltered because changing them would have broken the bank's formatting math. The withdrawals lined up with her purchases, almost to the week. A $4,000 withdrawal 8 days before the down payment on the car. A pair of withdrawals the month that the kitchen demo started. A cluster the week before the cruise. She had built her fake statement out of her own real spending account. The account she'd actually been bleeding to keep her lifestyle inflated while Trent's business sank. And then she'd photographed it, swapped the hospital's name onto the top, blurred the account holder, and handed it to my father as proof that I was the thief. It was almost elegant. She'd used a true document to tell a perfect lie. The withdrawals were real. The spender was real. She'd just changed 2 things, whose account it was and what fund it belonged to. And the cruelest part, the part I sat with for a long time that night, was that the real story was sadder than the lie. Bridget hadn't stolen $11,000 from our mother's memorial. She'd spent $11,000 she didn't have on a life she couldn't afford, watching her husband's business die. And rather than tell a soul, rather than ask for help, she'd reached for the one fund she couldn't touch and the one sister she could destroy. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the new deadbolt and the word thief in my aunt's mouth, and the feeling passed. I had the spending timeline. I had the donor list. I had Mr. Pruitt's check. But a timeline of purchases isn't proof of a crime. It's a pattern. I still needed the one document that connected her hands to the memorial money directly, undeniably, in a way no one could call coincidence. The reception check was that document. I just had to make sure it survived to the meeting, which is where my cousin Renata almost paid for helping me. Renata had sent me the photo of the forged statement. It was the single piece of evidence that let me prove the fake was a fake, and Bridget found out she'd done it. I don't know how. A slip from Aunt Carol, probably, who can't hold a secret in a bucket. But 4 days before the meeting, Renata called me, and her voice was thin and frightened. "Bridget knows I took the picture," she said. "She called me. She said if I show up to that meeting on your side, she'll tell my mom about something from a long time ago. Something I told Bridget in confidence when we were 19. Renata's breath shook. "Coralie, I can't have my mom hear that. Not like this. Not from her." I felt the trap close, neat and vicious, exactly the kind Bridget specialized in. She couldn't undo my evidence, so she was picking off the person who'd handed it to me. "Wren," I said carefully, "I will never ask you to do something that costs you that. I mean it. I have the photo. I don't need you in the room. You've already done the brave part. If you need to stay home, and I'll never hold it against you." There was a long silence. And then my cousin said something that changed the temperature of the whole thing. "No," she said. "No, I'm so tired of her doing this. She's been doing it my whole life. Finding the thing you're most afraid of and holding it over you so you'll be quiet. That's how she gets away with everything. Everyone's always too scared." A pause. "If I let her scare me out of that room, she wins twice. I'm coming, and I'll tell my mom myself tonight before Bridget can. Take the weapon out of her hand." I sat there holding the phone, humbled, because I'd spent weeks thinking I was the only one who'd been kept small by the threat of what the family might believe. I wasn't. Bridget had a whole inventory of secrets she held over people, a quiet economy of fear, and Renata had just decided to default on her debt. "You're braver than I am," I told her. "No," Renata said. "I just watched what they did to you and I decided I didn't want to be next." She told her mother that night. I don't know what the old secret was, and I never asked. But Aunt Carol, loud, opinionated, quick to judge Aunt Carol, apparently held her daughter while she cried and then said only, "That's nothing, baby. That's nothing at all." Which is the thing every person who's ever been blackmailed by their own shame needs to hear, and so rarely does. Bridget's weapon was gone. Renata was coming, And the photo was safe in 3 places now, because I am, after all, the kind of person who keeps backups. I had a foundation officer. I had a donor with a canceled check. I had a cousin who'd refused to be silenced. I had a forensic record built out of nothing but phone calls and patience. I was about to lose the window to use it. That same week, my family scheduled the meeting to vote me out. The invitation came as a text from my father, the first communication from him since he'd hung up on me. Family meeting Sunday the 14th, 2 o'clock, the office. We'll be deciding things. You should come and answer for yourself. Answer for yourself. Like a tribunal. They'd even chosen the office, the place with the locks he'd changed against me, so I'd have to be let in like a guest to my own family. I almost didn't reply. Part of me wanted to send everything by email, dump the proof in their inboxes, and never sit in a room with them again. But I knew that family. A document in an inbox can be ignored, dismissed, taken out of context. Bridget would spin it before they finished reading. I'd seen her do it. No. If I was going to do this, it had to be in that room, with the witnesses present, with Bridget unable to control the story. Texture is everything in a confrontation. The truth had to land where the lie had been told. So I wrote back 2 words, "I'll be there." And then I made the calls that I'd been saving. The first was to Dolores at the hospital foundation. I told her, honestly and completely, what had happened, that I'd been accused of stealing from the very fund I'd built to be untouchable, and that I had a family meeting where I needed someone to confirm the basic facts. Could she provide a signed letter on foundation letterhead stating the fund's total, its untouched status, and the fact that I had never been an authorized signer? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I'll carry for a long time. "Coralie, I set up dozens of these funds. You're the only family member who ever insisted on being kept off the account. I always remembered you for it. Of course I'll write the letter, and if it'd help, I could come." I hadn't expected that. "You'd come to a family meeting?" I've watched families do terrible things over money at the worst moment of their lives. If I can stop one of them, I'll drive an hour on a Sunday. She paused. Besides, I'd like to meet the sister who thought she could fake my foundation's statement. The second call was harder. It was to the bank where Davenport Renovations held its account. Not to demand anything I had no right to, but to ask a question. I'd done business with the branch manager, a steady man named Howard Ackerman, on a fraud case the year before. I called him not to pry into accounts I couldn't access, but to ask whether, if a depositor's own cleared check showed an endorsement into a specific business account, the bank could confirm to that depositor that the endorsement was genuine. Howard knew exactly what I was really asking, and he knew exactly where the lines were. "If Mr. Pruitt wants to come in and ask about his own check," he said, "I can sit with him and walk him through what's on it. That's his record. I can't tell you a thing about anyone else's account. But a man's own canceled check, that's his to understand." It was enough. It was more than enough. Because Mr. Pruitt, when I explained that his $200 for Diane's memorial had gone to a contractor instead of a cancer ward, got very quiet and then very firm. "I'll come to your meeting, young lady," he said, "and I'll bring my check. I gave that money for your mother. I'd like to know what happened to it, in front of everyone. I had a foundation officer. I had a donor with a canceled check. I had a forensic record built out of nothing but phone calls and patience. I had everything I needed to walk into that room and turn the table. And the night before the meeting, I almost lost all of it. Trent called me, Bridget's husband, the man whose company had cashed a dead woman's memorial check. He had never once called me in his life. "Coralie." He sounded almost friendly, which from Trent meant he wanted something. "Listen, I know things got out of hand. Families, right? Look, why don't we just settle this quietly, the 4 of us? You, me, Bridge, your dad, before Sunday. No need to make a thing of it." "Make a thing of what, Trent?" A pause. "Whatever you think you've got." So they knew I'd been calling donors. Of course they did. Small towns leak. They were scared, and a scared liar offering to settle quietly is a liar admitting the lie. But I also heard the threat underneath the friendliness. "Here's the situation," he went on, the warmth draining out. "If you show up Sunday throwing around accusations, you're not going to look like the victim. You're going to look like the bitter sister who couldn't stand that everyone loves Bridget more. Your dad already thinks you took the money. Carol's told the whole church. You walk in there and start naming names, and you'll just be confirming what they all already believe, that you're vindictive. Nobody's going to look at your spreadsheets, Coralie. They're going to look at your face, and they've already decided what they see. And for one long, terrible minute, I believed him, because he was right about one thing. They had already decided. I'd felt it in my father's voice, in the bright brass of that new deadbolt, in Bridget's satisfied smile on the sidewalk. They wanted me guilty. What if I walked in with my folder and my donor and my foundation officer and they simply refused to see it? What if the truth wasn't enough, because the truth had never been the thing they were after? I hung up without answering him. I sat in my dark kitchen, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, I felt the wound all the way open, the quiet one, the trustworthy one, and it had bought me nothing. They'd traded my whole life of reliability for one forged piece of paper from the daughter who lit up rooms. I thought about not going. I thought about just disappearing into my own life the way I'd watched other people do, going no contact, letting them believe what they wanted, protecting myself by vanishing. Then I looked at Mr. Pruitt's check, sitting in a clear sleeve on my counter. An 81-year-old man's $200 given for my mother, stolen for a kitchen remodel. He was coming Sunday. He'd asked to come. He wanted to know what happened to his gift in front of everyone, because it mattered to him. It wasn't only about me. It had never been only about me. But before the meeting, there was one more room I had to walk into. Bridget asked to see me alone. She texted me the morning before, 2 lines that were almost human. Can we talk? Just us. Coffee, the place on 5th 11. I knew it was a trap. I went anyway because sometimes you let the trap close so you can see how it's built. She was already there when I arrived, in the corner booth, 2 coffees in front of her like a peace offering. She'd cried recently, I could tell, and for once I didn't think it was performance. She looked tired in a way the costume couldn't cover. Sit, she said, please. I sat. I didn't touch the coffee. For a moment she actually seemed like my sister, the one from before, the one who used to braid my hair when I was 6 and our mother was working a double. Then she opened her mouth, and the moment died. I know you've been calling people, she said. Pruitt, the Garveys, digging. She wrapped both hands around her cup. Here's what I think should happen. You drop it. You come Sunday and you tell everyone it was a misunderstanding, that the fun's fine and you overreacted and we all move on. I'll make sure Dad takes you back. I'll smooth it over with Carol. Everything goes back to normal. Normal, I said, where I'm the thief who got forgiven. We're your family again. She leaned in. Coralie, do you have any idea what it does to a person to lose everything and have no one notice? Trent hasn't worked in 2 years. 2 years. I sold my engagement ring last spring. I've been smiling at church potlucks in a house I can't make the payments on, and not one person in this family ever once asked if we were okay. They asked you to handle the bills when Mom was dying. They never asked me to handle anything because nobody thinks I can handle anything. So I handled it myself. There it was. Not a confession exactly, but the door to one, swinging open. By taking the reception money, I said quietly. Her eyes flashed. It was sitting there. People handed it to me. Mom's money, family money, and meanwhile you'd locked the real fund up in some untouchable account like a vault. Like you didn't trust your own family. I didn't trust the situation, I said. I trusted it so little that I made sure I couldn't touch it either. That's not an insult to you, Bridget. That's just how you protect money in grief. I protected it from everyone, including me. Well, it didn't feel like protection, she snapped. It felt like you standing guard over Mom's memory and deciding none of us were good enough to be trusted with it. So no, I don't feel bad. I took what should have been ours anyway, and when it got complicated, I made sure it landed on the one person in this family who could survive it. You always survive, Coralie. You're the strong one. I figured you'd be fine. I looked at my sister for a long moment, and I realized she had just told me out loud across 2 cooling cups of coffee that she had framed me on purpose with a clear head because she'd calculated I could take the hit. There was no version of this where I'd misunderstood. She wasn't sorry. She was annoyed I'd refused to lie down. You framed me because you thought I could take it, I said. I framed you because somebody had to take it and it was never going to be me. She said it flat, almost bored, and then caught herself because she'd finally heard her own voice. Something flickered across her face. Not guilt, calculation. She'd shown too much. She straightened. But none of that matters, because here's the thing. It's still your word against a document with your name on it. You walk into that room Sunday with your little folder and your sad story about phone calls, and you know what they'll see. The bitter daughter who couldn't let Mom rest. I've already won, Coralie. I won the second Dad believed me. You're just too proud to admit it. She stood, dropped a few bills on the table, and walked out, and for the length of one breath, I let myself feel the weight of it. Because in that booth, in that moment, she had won. She'd confessed to my face and walked away, certain it changed nothing. And she was right that a confession with no witness is just two sisters and a cold coffee. But she'd made the same mistake she always made. She thought the meeting was about her word against mine. It was never going to be about words. I don't deal in words, I deal in records. I picked up the check from where I'd left it on my counter that night. And I decided that Trent was wrong about one thing, and so was Bridget. They thought the family would only look at my face. But I wasn't going to ask anyone to look at my face. I was going to make them look at theirs. Before I tell you what happened in that room, I need you to do one thing for me. If you've ever been the family scapegoat, the one they decided was guilty before you said a word, tell me below what they accused you of. I want to know I'm not the only one who sat in that chair. Now let me take you into the meeting. Sunday came gray and still. I arrived at the office at 5 minutes to 2. My father let me in himself, and that hurt more than the locks had. To stand on my own family's doorstep and wait to be admitted. He didn't meet my eyes. Sit anywhere, he said, as if I were a contractor giving an estimate. The 2 rooms had been opened into one. They'd brought in folding chairs. My mother's older sister Carol was there, in her good coat, mouth already set in a line of forgiveness she intended to grant me. My father took the head of the table. My mother, my stepmother, technically, the woman my father married 4 years after my mom died, a quiet woman named Pamela who had never been unkind to me and looked, that day, deeply uncomfortable, sat to his right, and Bridget. Bridget sat at the far end like a prosecutor, a manila folder squared neatly in front of her. Trent beside her, arms crossed, jaw tight. He gave me a look that said, "Remember what I told you." There were others. Renata, who gave me a tiny, frightened nod. 2 cousins, a neighbor or 2. Bridget had built an audience because Bridget always performs better with one. She didn't know she'd built mine. My father cleared his throat. We're here because of the memorial fund. Bridget has brought serious concerns. Coralie, you'll have a chance to respond. Bridget, go ahead. Bridget stood. She'd dressed for it. Soft sweater, no makeup, the costume of a wounded woman. She opened her folder and slid out copies of the statement, passing them down the table, hand to hand, the same way she'd passed the collection envelope at the funeral. I didn't want to do this, she began, and her voice cracked perfectly. She's my sister. But Mom's memory deserves the truth. Coralie set up the fund. She controlled it, and over the past year, $11,000 was withdrawn from it, into her account. While we grieved, she stole from our own mother's memorial. She let it sit. Carol shook her head slowly. My father stared at the table. The room turned, all of it toward me, and the verdict was already in their eyes. Coralie, my father said heavily, do you have anything to say? I'd waited 8 weeks for this. I stood up slowly. My hands were steady. I do, I said. But first I have something to show you. May I? I set my own folder on the table. I didn't open it yet. The statement Bridget gave you, I said, says Memorial Care Fund. Our mother's fund is called the Diane Whitman Memorial Fund. They're different names because they're different accounts. A small ripple. Bridget's chin lifted. It's the same fund. That's just the bank's shorthand. It isn't, I said. And we don't have to argue about it because the person who runs our mother's actual fund is here to tell you herself. I gestured to the door. Dolores stepped in. She'd been waiting in the hall. I'd asked her to. She wore a foundation badge and carried a single sheet of letterhead, and she had the unbothered authority of a woman who has explained restricted accounts to grieving people 100 times. The room rearranged itself. You could feel it. "My name is Dolores Reyes," she said. "I'm the gift officer at the hospital foundation. I administer the Diane Whitman Memorial Fund." She set her letter down where my father could see it. "I'll keep this simple. Every dollar donated through the official fund is accounted for and sitting in our restricted account, earmarked for the oncology unit. Nothing has been withdrawn by any family member. It cannot be. And Coralie Whitman," she looked around the table, "was never a signer on that account. She specifically asked to be kept off it when she set it up. In 11 years, she's the only family member who ever made that request. She structured it so that she could not touch a cent." Silence. The good kind. The kind that comes right before a lie starts to crack. Bridget recovered fast, then explained the $11,000 in withdrawals, with her name on it. "I'd be glad to," I said, "because that's the part that matters." This was the moment I'd built everything toward. I opened my folder. "Bridget's statement is a real bank statement," I said. "She didn't make it from nothing. She altered a real one. The letterhead was changed to say the hospital. The account name was blurred. But here's the thing about the name on it." I slid Renata's clear printout into the center of the table beside Bridget's blurry copy. "Enhanced, you can read the account holder. It says C. Whitman, and there are 2 C. Whitmans in this family." I let that breathe. "I'm Coralie Whitman, and Bridget kept the name Whitman. On her own accounts, she is also C. Whitman. The withdrawals on that statement are real. They came out of a real account. They just weren't mine, and they weren't from any memorial fund at all." Bridget's face did something then. A flicker, gone fast, but I'd spent my whole life reading her. "That's insane," she said. "You're twisting everything. Of course you'd say it's mine." "I wouldn't ask you to take my word for it," I said. "I never do. That's why I brought records." I turned to my father. "Dad, when I set up the fund, I had nothing to do with the cash and checks Bridget collected at the reception. Do you remember that?" She stood up and offered to gather donations for anyone who didn't trust the online portal. He nodded slowly. He remembered. "I have spent the last 3 weeks calling the people who gave that day. The Garveys, the Pruitts, Mom's cousin Lorraine. Over $6,000 in cash and checks went into Bridget's hands at that reception." I laid my donor spreadsheet down. Not $1 of it ever reached the foundation. Dolores will confirm there's no line for it. It simply vanished. The room had gone very cold. Carol was no longer shaking her head. She was staring at her niece. People misremember," Bridget said. "It was a chaotic day. Cash gets lost." "One of them wrote a check," I said, and I watched the blood leave my sister's face. "Mr. Pruitt," I said, and turned to the door again. He came in slowly, hat in his hands, 81 years old and straight-backed with purpose. He'd worn a tie. "I gave a check that day," he said to the whole room in the steady way of a man who has nothing to hide. $200, made out to Diane's memorial. I gave it to your daughter, Glenn." He nodded at my father. "This young lady called and told me it might not have gone where I meant it, so I went to my bank, and I got my check back." He held it up, the canceled check in its clear sleeve, and read the back of it aloud, slow and clear, the way he'd read it to me on the phone. "For deposit only. Davenport Renovations, LLC." The name dropped into that room like a stone into a still pond. Davenport, Trent's company. Everyone in that family knew the name of Trent's business, and everyone in that room watched Trent's arms come uncrossed. "That's a mistake," Trent said too fast. Checks get deposited wrong all the time. The bank misroutes." "That's what I thought you might say," I said. "So I asked someone who would know." I turned to the door one more time. Howard Ackerman stepped in. The bank manager, in his Sunday clothes, carrying nothing but a single sheet of paper and the unflappable calm of a man who has spent 30 years saying difficult true things to people across a desk. "Afternoon," he said to the room. "My name's Howard Ackerman. I manage the branch where Mr. Pruitt banks." He nodded at the old man. "Mr. Pruitt came in last week and asked me to help him understand what happened to a check he wrote. That's his right. It's his check, his record. So I sat with him and we pulled the cleared image, front and back." He held up his sheet. I can't discuss anyone else's account, but I can tell you what's plainly stamped on the back of this man's own check, because it's his to know. It was endorsed and deposited into a business account in the name of Davenport Renovations, LLC. There's no misroute. A misroute doesn't carry a business deposit stamp. Someone deposited it on purpose. He set the paper down beside Mr. Pruitt's check, the two matching each other exactly, and the room had nowhere left to hide. "It's your endorsement stamp, Trent," I said quietly. "Your business stamp on a check written to my mother's memorial." "I'd like to know that too," Mr. Pruitt said and looked straight at Trent. "Where did it go, son?" Bridget broke first, the way I knew she would. She didn't cry sweetly anymore. She stood up so fast her chair scraped. "You don't understand what it's been like." Her voice climbed and cracked, ugly now, real now. "You have no idea. The business was failing. We were going to lose the house, and nobody offered to help. Everyone just expected us to be fine." She caught herself, but it was too late. The shape of the confession was already in the air. "Bridget," my father said. His voice had gone strange. "What did you do?" "It was a loan," she shouted. "It was Mom's money. It was supposed to be family money, and Coralie locked it all up in some hospital account where nobody could touch it, like she owned it, like she was better than all of us." She pointed at me, hand shaking. "She made it so I was going to pay it back." "You pinned it on me," I said. The whole room heard how quiet I stayed. "You took cash from a man's hand at our mother's funeral. You deposited a memorial check into your husband's company. And when you needed to cover it, you forged a statement with my name on it and told Dad I robbed his dead wife's memory. You let Aunt Carol tell the church I was a thief. You let him change the locks against me. I didn't raise my voice once. I held Mom's hand when she died, Bridget. You couldn't bear to watch. And you sold me to this family for a kitchen remodel. Such a comfort," I said, "to know family was handling it." Mrs. Garvey's words, the ones that had followed me for days. I said them quietly into that silent room, and I watched Bridget understand that I'd talked to the old woman she'd hugged, that I knew exactly what she'd whispered while taking the cash. "That's what you told Mrs. Garvey when she gave you $300. A 76-year-old woman comforted that family was handling it. That's the part I can't forgive, Bridget. Not the money, the comfort. You let people feel safe while you robbed them. Nobody defended her. That was the moment it was over. Not when the evidence landed, but when the room went silent and no one rushed to her side. Carol had turned fully away. Renata had a hand over her mouth, but she had not looked at the floor once. She sat upright, unblackmailed, finally free of the thing that had kept her quiet for 15 years. And my father was looking at his older daughter as if seeing a stranger, and then he was looking at me, and his face was coming apart. Trent stood, said something about lawyers, and got no further because Howard Ackerman cleared his throat from the doorway and said mildly, "Son, I wouldn't. The check speaks for itself, and threats in a room full of witnesses don't help your account." Trent sat back down. Even his bluster had run out of road. If you've ever finally been believed, after being doubted by the people who were supposed to know you best, you understand there's no triumph in it. There's only a kind of grief that the proof was ever needed at all. If this story reached you tonight because you know that feeling, say so in the comments. You're not the only one who had to bring receipts to your own family. My father stood up. For a moment I thought he would speak to Bridget. He didn't. He came around the table to me, and his hands were shaking, and he said the thing I'd stopped letting myself want to hear. "I changed the locks," he said, "on my steady girl." His voice broke on it. "I'm sorry, Coralie. I'm so sorry." I didn't fall into his arms. I want to be honest about that. 8 weeks is a long time to be a thief in your father's eyes, and a single Sunday doesn't undo it. But I didn't turn away either. I put my hand over his, the way he'd once put his over mine on a calculator the summer I was 16, and I said, "I know, Dad. The aftermath was not a movie. It was paperwork, which is fitting because I'm the one who deals in paperwork." Dolores filed a report with the foundation about the diverted reception donations, and the foundation's attorney sent Bridget and Trent a demand for restitution of every documented dollar. the $6,000 in vanished gifts, in full, to be paid to the oncology unit where our mother died. Trent's name on Mr. Pruitt's check made denial impossible. They're on a payment plan now. Every month, a check from Davenport Renovations goes to the cancer ward, which is, I think, the closest thing to justice the world actually offers. The stolen money finishing the trip it was always meant to make. My father didn't press charges. I didn't ask him to. There was a grandchild to think of, and Bridget is, whatever else she is, his daughter and my sister. But the restitution is real, and public, and binding, and Bridget's costume of the perfect grieving daughter is gone for good. Aunt Carol called every person she'd told I was a thief and told them the truth, which cost her something, and I respect that it did. Bridget never apologized to me. The closest she came was a text weeks later. "I hope you're happy. You blew up the whole family." I didn't answer it. I'd learned, finally, that her version of an apology was just another way to make herself the victim, and I no longer had to attend that performance. Renata and I talk now. Really talk. The way we never did when we were younger and both too scared of the same person. She told her mother everything that long ago secret had cost her to carry, and Aunt Carol, to her credit, has spent the months since trying to be a different kind of mother. Bridget's quiet economy of fear, the one she ran on everyone's worst secret, collapsed the day one person refused to pay. I think about that more than I expected to. How much power a liar holds only because everyone around her agrees to stay quiet, and how fast it ends when even one person stops. I see my father now. We're slow about it and careful, the way you are with something you nearly broke. He comes to my place sometimes, and I cook, and he tells me I look like my mother. He gave me a key to the office, the new key, unasked. I keep it on my ring, even though I rarely go. It isn't about the office. It's about being trusted again, in the open, where everyone can see. Here is what I learned, and it's the thing I'd hand to you across this table if I could. For 34 years, I thought that if I was reliable enough, careful enough, trustworthy enough, my family would have to believe in me. But being depended on is not the same as being believed, and I'd confused the two my whole life. The day they doubted me, all that reliability turned to nothing in under a minute. What saved me wasn't being good. It was being clear-eyed and refusing to confess to a story just because the people I loved had already decided it was true. I'm still the quiet one. I'll always be the quiet one. But quiet isn't the same as silent, and I will never again let someone hand my own name to a room and tell everyone it means thief. I have a voice. It just happens to be made of records. My mother's fund finished its work last month. The oncology unit named a family waiting room after her. A small, bright space with good chairs, where people sit through the worst hours the way I once did. Every dollar that was supposed to build it did, even the ones that took a detour through my sister's lie. I went to see it alone, on a Tuesday. I sat in one of the good chairs for a while, and for the first time in a long time I wasn't holding anyone's hand or balancing anyone's books or answering for a crime I didn't commit. I was just my mother's daughter in a quiet room, finally believed.